to thank you all for putting this conference together, and I appreciate being allowed the opportunity to present today. I also wanted to sort of say that I'm an Americanist, so I'm looking at it from slightly different perspective than most of you. If I teach this class, and the if is important because our university is going through crisis, and a lot of people have quit, and so I'm teaching all kinds of other classes instead of what I'm supposed to be teaching, which is Latino cultural studies. But it is what it is. And so I haven't taught it in a while. And so I haven't gotten a chance to really use like everything that I learned at the NEH seminar during the summer, and I'm hoping that that changes in the future. But for now, it's a little tough going. I also wanted to let you know that this is probably the only exposure my students are going to get to Latino voices in American literature, at least from that time period of 1865 to 1914. And so I have to do my best to like kind of get that information there as quickly as possible. And I think in the future, I'm going to do what James sort of said. There's no way I'm not going to be able to connect this to Trump or Trump politics in the last 4 years. So I can't wait to teach the class again, because I think when they read these quotes out again from the two selections that I have, they're going to be kind of very shine a light on where we are or where we were in the last 4 years. And I kind of share the screen. I'm going to just kind of show you that in the past, anyway, students have, responded pretty heavily. This is at the end of a semester, week 9, or sort of toward the end of the semester. You can see that people have like kind of really engaged. There's a lot of questions that I ask, but to give you a sense that there is like an investment in this idea. And so my class, let me see if I can get this PowerPoint to come up. Okay. And this PowerPoint was made a while back for a different reason, but let's see what I can do here. So some of the questions my students are going to be answering, and remember, this is an American Lit class, and so the focus is really more about American literature, is what it is to be an American, or what is America per se. And so I use Jose Marti's Nuestra America, or Our America, and Theodore excerpts from Theodore Roosevelt's From American Ideals. And this is a really popular, Theodore Roosevelt actually published quite many books, if you didn't already know that. But this is one of his more popular works, and an excerpt of is in the American Literature Anthology that I use. I had to pick out a picture of Jose Marti on a horse, which I don't have. So this is our like horse sort of equivalent of this Theodore Roosevelt photo, right? So these are the only options that I sort of kind of have to share with my students. But anyway, this is the kinds of stuff that we would do in the class. We would, sorry, hold on a second. My computer's also doing all the things that people were talking about earlier. Okay, so we would discuss the time period. Okay, it's still messing up. Late 1800s, politically, economically, etc. We would specifically examine America's beginning expansionism, Roosevelt's desire to increase the influence of the US in a global picture. He also believed that that the American values would be sort of role model, or people would want to imitate American values and ideals, and thought that he could positively spread it toward a global world. We would talk about the Rough Riders in Cuba, and we would talk about Roosevelt's desire for Cuban independence from Spain. We discussed the literature of the time. We would already be doing this anyway, but what I would include is this examination of what America is, right? Not just that America is America, but that America means Americas, right? And so Americas means more than just American or from the United States perspective, but also includes Latin America, right? Not just the Latin American thing, but also the Caribbean as well. But anyway, so I would be including this idea of like a plural Americas perspective from the residents that are in the United States, or from outside perspectives. And this leads to bigger discussions on isolationism, manifest destiny, expansionism, our role in Latin America. There are so many things that we talk about. on us, but again, on a very introductory level. But the big goal is to get students to really kind of get away from this egocentric discourse about what it means to be American and its superpower mentality, or what it might have been, that we sort of got our superpower mentality by going in and like ruining other nations. Okay, that's not exactly what I tell them, but that's sort of where they get where they get to. So on some basic level, they compare and contrast the two writers in the two pieces. If I have time, we talk about the truth about the United States, but the goal is always about dissecting and analyzing language, which is a big focal point for me. Um, so what they would learn, right? They would learn a little bit of the history of the literature, and how political the literature is getting. They would learn how it connects, how literature directly connects to movements and immigration laws in the United States. There were a lot of immigration laws during Roosevelt's presidency and then forward on after his presidency. They would also learn about US's hand reaching toward other countries. I like to use the word colonialism because I am Puerto Rican, so I get a chance to kind of cover this perspective of America reaching its hand, assuming its generosity is going to change the world, but in fact conquering a lot of nations and doing all kinds of bad things to other nations. They would learn about Marti's admiration of some of American policies, specifically the educational systems in the US, but his criticism of the political, how disinterested people seem to be, especially among the working classes, and how often elites took advantage of that disinterest. I won't go through all of these other slides, except to say that these are some of the excerpts that not only I have taken out of the text, but the students themselves have taken out of the text. So I kind of extrapolated not necessarily all the quotes that I would have taken out, but that the students find really interesting and want to discuss in the 2 weeks that we sort of cover this idea. This is just a small piece of a large American literature puzzle. So these are some of the quotes. I'm just kind of slide through these. You're not going to be able to like see them all. And of course, if you want these quotes later, you can. This is again from Theodore Roosevelt's From American Ideals. So these are some of the quotes. Um, it's a very anti-immigration stance. It's a very, if you're going to come to the United States, you better assimilate stance. I think people are kind of a little bit surprised by it, not because they don't know it's happening or that they don't know people are saying it, but that I have to kind of remind them that Roosevelt is not talking about Latinos in this time period, but that in fact he's talking about Germans and that he's talking about Irish people. There's a famous quote, I think I extrapolated somewhere where it says something about like, get rid of the Queen and the Kaiser. And so like, they're a little bit shocked. I don't know if people are just not teaching them about immigration, but they're a little bit shocked that that this really was about him being very hostile toward German and Irish immigrants that wouldn't get rid of who, everything that they were in order to assimilate to United States, or this idea of what it is to be American. Anyway, oh, this is the one right here. He must learn to celebrate the birthday of Washington's birthday rather than that of Queen or Kaiser, and the 4th of July instead of St. Patrick's Day. Now, at this point, I connected back to Phyllis Wheatley's poem and such of that nature. Anyway, so these are some of the quotes. And then, of course, the same is true for Our America. And there's like a ton of quotes that we take out. Born in America, who are ashamed. All of these these are highlights of student responses. I mean, this is from Our America, but what I'm saying is that I'm highlighting that which students seem to be the most interested in, like the actual quotes inside the text that students want to talk about a lot. And so these highlights show that. There's a lot of them, to say the least. We get to the end of the semester. I mean, not the end of the semester, but the end of the section, and we ask some questions, right? Who were the audiences of each text? What different visions of America, or by extension Americas, are presented by Martí and Roosevelt? Are there any similarities? What different visions of who is American are presented? and by extension, who can become American, things like that, and what did Martí and Roosevelt think about other nations and our roles in global politics. And then we sort of just kind of, if I have a lot of time, I would go into a connection to politics and language in the contemporary world. Can't ignore the politics of Trump. And I am actually, I like to also examine issues of masculinity. So I have a sense that they could probably do a lot with examining this idea of masculinity and how it's tied to nationalism or national identity or the conquering of other nations or colonialism. I think there's something there. And I think students have pointed it out like, a lot of times actually, that's why it's here. And so that is kind of pretty much what I do. It's really just kind of a section that introduces them to Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt introduces them to Jose Marti, and I welcome any comments.